Aw yeah, Rivers here with some cool tech, and this is the Imito QX1 Android Mini PC. This is the latest version in the Imito series. The Imito MX1 was one of my favorite amps because it had a great ROM and was nice and fast. Now let's take a closer look at the QX1 and see if it lives up to the MX1's reputation. The QX1 has great hardware, including a quad-core A9 Rockchip 3188 CPU, Mali 400 MP4 quad-core GPU, 2 gigs of DDR3 DRAM, 8 gigs of NAND flash storage, built-in Bluetooth, Wi-Fi 802.11 BGNN, and here's a cool feature, it has an internal antenna with an option to expand to an external antenna. And finally, it's got Android Jelly Bean 4.2 with a true 1080p kernel available. As far as ports go, it's got an HDMI that you can plug into the back of your television set. On the back, it's got a full-size USB port and your external Wi-Fi antenna port. And finally, along this side, you've got a micro SD card slot, good for cards up to 32 gigabytes. You've got a micro USB port used for powering the QX1 and for updating new firmware, and the flash mode button. Now, if you open up the QX1, you can actually see that they were very smart when they designed it, because the CPU right here connects to this heat transfer pad here that goes to the top of the case, which is metal. So the top of the case acts as a heat sink to keep it cool. Now when you're running a true 1080p kernel and using a lot of CPU power by running apps like live wallpapers and video games, the QX1 or any other quad-core Android Mini PC that I know of right now is going to get pretty warm. Luckily, the top metal plate design makes it easy to add a passively cooled heatsink which keeps it cool no matter what you throw at it. Here I'm using an old Pentium 1 CPU cooler with no fan at all, and that's enough to keep the QX1 nice and cool. So basically, if you install the 1080p kernel on pretty much any quad-core device, it's going to get pretty warm. And the QX1 is the easiest one to keep cool right now. And by the way, if you're going to run the regular 720p kernel, you shouldn't need any additional cooling. Okay, the last piece of hardware we have here is this optional external Wi-Fi antenna. And it really does make a difference and improve the Wi-Fi signal. I'll show you some tests in a little bit that show that, and I'll add it onto my chart with a comparison of Wi-Fi signals of other quad-core devices. Okay, now let's take a look at what you'll see the first time you boot up the QX1. So this is Jelly Bean 4.2.2. It's running that 720p kernel upscaled, so it still looks pretty dang good. We've got the soft power button on the taskbar here, which is always a nice thing to have. So it starts you off with a good selection of basic apps that you'll need, like calendar, calculator, DNLA streaming, email, picture viewer, maps, Google Play is fully working, joystick button mapping software, you got your video player and Miracast app. Okay, let's take a look at the settings before I flash over to the 1080p ROM. First off, we've got Wi-Fi, which works great, connected up in about 10 seconds. Bluetooth is working, but it seemed to slow the device down just a little bit. Ethernet works if you use an adapter, and I'll put a link to one that works really good in the description down below. And here's your display resolution. It's outputting at 1080p, even though it's running on a 720p kernel. It's upscaled to 1080p, so it still looks really good. Not quite as good as the 1080p kernel, though. Here's how your flash memory is partitioned out. So you've got 1 gig for app storage and about 5.5 for data storage, and then the rest is for different things in the operating system. And here you can see the Android version is 4.2.2 and all the build numbers and kernel version. Okay, here I've installed an updated true 1080p ROM. I've installed Nova Launcher to change the size and style of the icons, and Planet Pack's live wallpaper to test the performance of the QX1. The ROM itself works great. Netflix is working, which is nice because Netflix has had problems on other Android Mini PCs running 4.2.2. The unit itself stays nice and cool when the CPU is not in heavy use, but when you're running live wallpapers, movies, or video games, it's going to get kind of warm. Also, a few apps don't work on this ROM, and Antutu is one of them, so I can't run that benchmark. Here's a new app I'm going to run from now on, though. It's called CPU-Z, and it gives you all the information about the CPU on your Android device. It even shows you real-time clock speeds of each core, and all the way up to your max clock speed. So you can run an app and have it running in the background, and you can see it changing on this here, but you can see that it really is running 1080p here. Next up is LinPack, and this is a quick CPU benchmark. So it gets about 116 on this one, and that's really good for a 1080p kernel, so I'm very happy with that. And over here we can see with Root Checker that this is not rooted. I've talked to Finless Bob about this, and he says he will be making a custom ROM for this pretty soon. Remember, it's got a built-in internal antenna, but also it comes with an optional external antenna that you can plug in. The external antenna seems to increase the signal strength by about 10%. It's a nice option to have. I added the QX1 to the chart I made comparing the Wi-Fi signal on the different Android mini PCs. I've also got my Samsung Galaxy S3 in there for comparison. Next, let's take a look at the video quality. XBMC is not working on this ROM, but Finless Bob's ROMs usually fix it so that at least MX Player versions of XBMC work. For now, we'll just use MX Player to show what the video quality looks like. This is some video I shot on my Panasonic HC-X920 and Sony PJ710 camcorders at 60 frames a second. It hasn't been re-encoded, it's the original MTS file. I think the 60 frames per second are making the video play back a little bit slow, but I just wanted to give you an idea of how good the details can look on a 1080p kernel. And this is captured directly with an HDMI capture, so you're seeing exactly what would be on the TV coming out of the QX1. And finally, I just wanted to show you that games do work on the QX1. I'm playing Shadowgun here, which is totally 3D accelerated and no lag at all, and it looks great. Don't forget, Finless Bob said he will be making a custom ROM for the Imito QX1 soon. The 1080p ROM is actually very good considering 4.2.2 is still pretty new. I think the few bugs it has will be fixed very soon.
Where are you now?
I'll put a link to the latest ROM available in the video description down below. I'll also put a link to where you can get the QX1 with a free external antenna and USB Ethernet adapter. I have to say the QX1 is one of the best quad-core Android mini PCs yet. It's very fast and smooth, and I love the heat dissipating design. If you like this video and want to see more like it, be sure and subscribe to my channel. I put out new videos about every week. And please do me a favor and hit that little like button below the video. That helps me out a lot. As always, thanks for watching and aloha.